So yeah, I got out of high school, and so I spent the first couple of years with my uncle in the egg business, and really good for me, taught me a lot about business. My uncle's business skills were fabulous, and learned a lot at a young age, and learned my community a lot. And then I started getting into stuff with my father, and getting into carrots, potatoes. We were big in onions back then. I think we got up to almost 20 properties with rental properties at one time. Some even being down here with the Red Barn, all that land in the back, and all the Panama Flats, and a lot of work. And so kept working with my father, and then started getting to my late 20s, and started to find myself as a man, and realized I really like berries. So Galey's had been bouncing around in all these different directions all these years, but my uncle and my father supported me, and started off with, my father had started getting into strawberries, and then I started into raspberries and such. And, there's a lot of change over the years, and, the next generation coming in. And so, how would we get in? So I also started getting to what we call agritourism. And I think most people have heard how big that's gotten now. It's the most important part of the farming today, I believe, is because people now recognize who we are in the community, and on-farm sales are the most important thing to us as a farm now. All the money used to be all made in the wholesale and retail end of agriculture. So the farmer really got a very small piece of the pie, and it was really tough to make ends meet. When we do our on-farm sales, and I'm sure many of you people have come out and bought the eggs up at Gordy's and bought the strawberries and stuff down at the other side, that money's staying with us, and, we can actually have a future in farming. So getting back to the history of Royal Oak, I personally went to, my grandfather was one of the founders of Cordova Bay. I think he was second pioneer that moved into Cordova Bay. And so he was heavily involved with developing Cordova Bay, and there when the school and Cordova Bay Church was built and such. So I started out school at Cordova Bay Elementary, same as my father. And then all of us Galeys got switched over when Lochside got built. And so I went to Lochside, and then off to Royal Oak. And then I went to Reynolds when we split and bought all the new land, and my brother and sister stayed with their friends in Claremont. But I had actually met all the local kids in the Blenkinsop area by that time, and I decided I wanted to stay on that end. But you go back to Claremont School, my uncle, my father, all my cousins, my brother, my daughter is now in Claremont right now. So a lot of heritage in this area. So going into a lot of the things that have changed in agriculture, agriculture these days, you have to be an agribusiness. You can't just start planting seeds and hope for the best and pray for really good weather and just hope. There's so much we can do now. A lot of the land we are operating for produce and agritourism now. Everything has drain systems, and so every 20 to 30 feet, depending on what field we're in, we have drain tile in the field, and they go into a pump house and they get lifted up and the water's taken away. And you see the press all the time. You've probably seen me with the press, and they come in and the weather's coming and people are getting floods and all that. They're like, Rob, this is really affecting you. How are you going to make it out? And they're looking for this really sad story. And I'll turn it around on them, and I'll say, it's a nuisance having all this rain, but thank goodness that we were prepared for this. We knew we were going to get heavy rains coming one day, which is why we're investing into making sure so when all these things happen, we're ready for it and we have a plan. So the heavy rains come. This year wasn't too bad. 3 years ago in the pumpkin patch, when we had all those really heavy rains, pumpkin patch went underwater, and within 2 days you could walk on it in your running shoes. That fast. Just keep those pumps running 24 hours a day. We were okay, but we knew one day that this was going to pay off. And this year it got pretty wet in the beginning of October. Once again, pumped it off. Corn maze, all of our berry stock, very expensive to plant berry stock. But things like blueberry and raspberries, you're looking to try and get 10 years production off that field. And none of those plants like wet roots. So drainage is so important when it comes to that. So yeah, we've learned from that, and we learn from our mistakes. If something does go wrong, then it needs change, it needs upgrading, and you have to keep looking to the future. We've done a lot of different things with the environment. A big creek project we did back in the early 2000. Two of the properties, one we own, one we rent, had ditches going right down the middle. And they were just ditches. And it would help get the water out. But all the natural support of all the insect world and how Mother Nature works in harmony, when you take a piece out of that pie and it's not in harmony anymore, you've got an issue. And that's where you start getting bad bugs and your birds are missing and a lot is missing out of the environment. So Saanich actually made a proposal to build an actual creek starting from scratch. So Aquatech came in and they put a lot of money into that project, moved it out of the middle, put all trees and everything back in, logs into there for all the birds to live in, bumblebees are living in there. I get berry people coming from the mainland and they come into my berry fields. It's like an airport inside. It's so cool because you got bumblebees and honeybees everywhere and they're so busy. And so doing things like that to put the environment back, because back in the day when we just took out our natural creeks and put the ditches in, we lost so much of the important parts of our environment. Actually, just to let you know, after Aquatech finished the project in Blenkinsop, they were off to New York for, I think, 5 to 10 years. And all the ditches that they all the creeks they'd taken out in New York, they wanted to restore. So Aquatech was gone after us. So very successful project. But part of that is there's a bigger picture. So what we do now is a lot of IPM. Back in the days, our pioneer farmers, we used to use insecticides and all this, and we'd come along, and so you got a really bad outbreak of, say, aphids. Everyone knows what aphids is. So what do? You take the whole field and you spray the whole thing. And so you kill everybody. And, a week, 10 days later, who's the first one back? Well, the aphids. So what do? You spray it again. And this gets repetitive all summer long. So I do a lot of IPM now, monitoring all the insects that are in the field, monitoring all kinds of things at all times, and more sciences. Put in strawberries up at my uncle's place, up towards Lowbrenner in Blenkinsop, and that farm, I think this year we put out 35,000 ladybugs. It must have been up to 100-something thousand Ambulosis phalacis. Those will eat spider mites. And the great part about doing like that is they do all the work. But, back in the old days, we didn't have bug farms. You weren't able to buy all these insects, which my generation now, they're actually suppliers that will deliver these right to the farm. But when you take a field and you put the ladybugs out, you put them out to the center, and they'll keep eating their way out to the end of the field, and nobody's left behind them when they start shedding out. And then they start heading out into the bushes that was surrounding the field that was actually hiding all the bugs to come back in. So it's actually taking it all the way out. You don't ever need to reapply. So all you really need to do with Mother Nature is where you see a bit of a weakness, just a bit of a boost before you get a problem. But once you have a major problem, you have a problem. So you've got to be ahead of the game. Same as anything else, you know, when you got a cold, treat the cold. But once you got the flu, you know, we have the same thing with vegetables. We'll actually put a field under. So same as some carrots this year, we had some carrot rust fly and just put it under. Another few things I could tell you about is different ways that we're growing now. So let's talk about irrigation. I'm big into microdrip. So I do a lot of traveling in the winter. I've actually learned a lot of things down in the States and down in California. I'm sure everyone's aware they have a major water problem down in California, and they treat water like gold. So microdrip, I actually, I've developed my own system where I put plastic mulch over the field, and so that's going to stop all your weeding. That's going to stop the wind from picking all the moisture up off the ground. And then we actually put pipes right next to the plants all the way down, and they're dripping most of the time 0.045 gallons per minute per 100 feet, so very little water. And that water is going right to the root system. And that water, once it's down, it's underneath the plastic and it can't be taken back up. But now that we have these pipes, I can actually put the fertilizer in weekly. And if you look at how fertilizers work, we have something, if you look on fertilizers, you always see the 3 numbers on the front. Those are your primary fertilizers. So you have NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potash. So on the young plants, or different plants that you'll see, when you first start a plant, it needs heavy phosphorus, and that's for the roots. And then we'll go back and we'll get the plants, because I don't want the plants to really grow, especially strawberries, right after I plant them. I want them to get the big feet, just get your root system down. So you get a really good strong root system, and then you go back to the first number, the nitrogen. And as soon as you give them a bit of nitrogen, they come up very quickly. And once you get the right size plant and all the flowers are coming on, then potassium. And that'll get you your really good fruit. But instead of giving them a one-time feed, and those fertilizers will wash down because they don't stay around the plant for the time that you need, you apply it as you need it. That gives us a lot of savings. I mean, you watch back in the old days where we used to use those big guns, and you watch, even today you go down the highway and you see that giant thing across the field. You can actually watch all the water just fading into the air, gone. And then actually, if they actually got 2/3 to the ground, and it gets onto the surface, usually it'll get picked up again. And water is now very expensive, so you have to look at your costs and look at your techniques. And the way that we've learned to fertilize and add fertilizers at the right time, you're really reducing the amount of fertilizers you need, which is very expensive now. And you're getting healthier crops. It's just helping everything in every way. Another thing with the new plastic techniques is putting the plants into it is labor. And I'm sure everybody's heard about the labor crunch. I don't think it's just in agriculture. I think labor crunch is getting... I think the labor crunch is hitting all industry now. We have a lot of people coming from out of country. We personally have 16 men from Mexico for about 8 years now. That might go a little higher this year. These guys come up here, they just want to work, right? They're, they want 10, sometimes 12-hour days, 7 days a week. And like any person that's going to work camp, they're away from their families and children, and they want to go home. So they come up, they want to make some good money, take care of their family, make sure their kids can get into college, anything else, and then they want to go home. This year I had ads on the internet started in November, kept ads going all the way through the summer. Less than 10 people replied all that time. Anybody that came to the farm and had a resume in their hand, didn't even need the resume, just told them you're hired. And had troubles with things working out. It's not a fun life being out in the fields all day to some people, but to other people's it's a great life. And for me, I love it. And my son is now full-time working at the farm, and he's 20 now. And hopefully we'll see this keep going many more generations. If we're smart, we should be able to keep it going. The key thing is for any local sustainable agriculture now is the support with the community, and as I said, on-farm sales at the farm, and people coming to pick stuff up at the farm. That's our key to survival into the future. Is there anything else you guys have questions about?
I have one.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever looked into subterranean watering systems?
Yeah, we do have done some of that before, where we put water back into the ditch and gone backwards through our drain tiles. Yeah, and it would have to be a deep rooting plant like corn. So.
Just thinking about the ones that go, you were talking about those ones there, if there's any way they can be lowered, and in a subterranean system, they're underground, they go this way and just come up under the plant, right?
Yeah. The newer technology with drip tape is more my preference. It's more exact. It's right to the plant. And I use something called PC tape, which stands for pressure compensating. So the drip tape, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar, 5/8 tube. I use emitters that are running 12 inches apart. And those emitters are letting out the exact same water at 6 psi as they are at 28 psi. Right? So I can go right up a hillside, and if you were running just normal drip tape that had holes in them, and you were heading up the hillside and the bottom's running 26, 28 psi and the top's down to like 6 or 4, the bottom's getting all the water. So this new technology, drip tape, exact same amount of water anywhere on that slope. Yeah, technology is really coming into play these days. Yeah.
So when I was a kid, we had a strawberry farm, and it was my job to go out and cut the blooms off the plants the first year. Do you still do that?
Only on the weaker plants. So you're talking about taking the flowers off? Yeah. So what we'll do is we start planting. We'd only ever do that on our Albion. So I'll answer your questions first, and I just thought of a new one. So if we have one plant that's a lot smaller than the other ones, that plant is taking a lot of its energy towards putting it all into that hand, into that bloom, and so she's not going to be working on growing on the plant. All the energy is heading out to the new plant. So yeah, we'll go in, we'll take maybe 10% of the plants that just didn't grow as strong, and we'd rather see the mother get bigger for next year. I only call them the mothers because that's the Mexicans, they all call them mama, which is the mother plant. So yeah. Another thing that's really changed with strawberries now, I mean, I've had almost 500,000 plants at one time. So go through a lot of plants. This year I'm around 400,000 plants, so a lot of care. And the different things now is we used to only have, even going back 10, 12 years, we only had strawberries in June. Right now we run strawberries, some early varieties towards the end of May, and then Albions going right into the end of September. Just different varieties. So once again, more traveling, more watching, more learning, and all these different varieties that come out at different times. And so especially in when you're growing for on-farm sales, you can't have one variety that does that, because Here you got that big peak. Where are you going to sell it? And then right away you got this lull. So I have all these different varieties coming like this all the way across now from the end of May all the way into October. And yeah, we get a few little peaks and a few little valleys, but not a lot. And that's why if you guys ever come to the market, and today we've pints only, because we're in one of those valleys, and then you'll see we're selling flats. That means we're up again. Nature, we try and plant it so that it's really consistent, but obviously weather conditions can push some things forward and pull some things back, which will get you a bigger gap. So we do what we can. Yep.
I think when your farm opened up for the hay rice and the corn maze was a great idea. Can you remember whose pipe dream that was and what year that took place? Because I think that was a really good addition. And we do enjoy your trucks in the parade as well.
Well, thank you. I think it was 99. Yes, I've been, I think it was 99 that, I was getting a little potatoed out, a little repetitive once again, and, started getting into the berries, and approached my father and uncle and said, I'm going to try a corn maze. And it was like the new thing, and, reading up a lot on the internet. That was dial-up back then, by the way. And they agreed to rent me a small piece, and then they leased me a bigger piece, and I started the market. And that's when the Galey Farms came out. And it was a lot taking it on. I did little eager too fast and came up with some sillier ideas, and it got sillier and sillier. And then you saw things like the Sphinx show up in the middle of the field. Back then you could get away with it because there was no real governing body on agritourism back then. Where now there's a lot of governing bodies where things like gnomes, not like anybody here has heard, but you have to go to the city and get a variance because of the height of the gnome. Well, I don't think he's the tallest thing there.
Lowered his feet into the ground.
That was the first thing I did when I met with council. Is I said, can't I just lower him? And they said, no, he has to go off natural grade. And just to clarify with people what it was like working with Saanich on that project. So when I sat down with the girls, they explained it to me finally where I understood it. They said, Rob, if Saanich was gifted Howard ourselves and wanted to put him up at Commonwealth Pool, this is a process we would have to do to ourselves before we could even put it up. And then it was like, I got it now. So they were always cooperative. They were not against me. And they got that variance through in record time. And they were really good to work with and talk to council. And they voted unanimous. And it really wasn't, it was not a hard process.
How tall is Howard?
Jeez, so many numbers in my head. I think he's 28, about 28 feet. Yeah. And did everything we promised. He blinks, he waves, and he's got the friendliest face with these big blue eyes. And the final thing was, I said to David, we've got to get the eyelashes on him. So took a big broom out of the shop, cut off all the black bristles off of there, glued them all on, and now he looks so friendly now. He's not. He was good for the kids, and the amount of photos on the all season long this year in October is nonstop. So it was just selfie after selfie after selfie. Yeah.
You ever thought of going into apples or orchards like that, or?
Yeah, I'd looked at tree fruit a bit. Not really my thing. My son's only 20. Maybe he'll be the apple guy and we'll move again.
Yeah, when I was in Kelowna, they had all the apple trees and the fruit trees. Now they've got them, they're So they don't, branches don't spread out, so they can get more in and are easier to pick, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're quite narrow, like a, quite unique.
Yeah, there's a lot of change in all agriculture and the high breeding and, making, yeah. Yes?
Rob, what happened to your strawberry field on Wilkinson Road? We live up at Loret's Park,
Oh, yeah.
and now my wife's got to drive over to Blenkinsop to get your lovely strawberries.
Yeah, so our sales just got so high this year, so I'm contemplating getting bigger again. I got a rule against myself: don't get too big too quick. And for the last probably 5-6 years, I've promised myself 5% a year. That's as much as I'll grow. It's 5% more per year. We might go up 10% this year. And the thing was, when we get short, Wilkinson's the first to close, because if we can't supply even Blenkinsop, Wilkinson's got to get shut down. Well, we couldn't really get Wilkinson back over because, like you said, your wife started coming to Blenkinsop to get her berries. And so without having the second satellite stand over there, our sales got so high on Blenkinsop that we just can't produce enough. We can't pick them fast enough. We got pretty good berries. And, the difference, especially, you start looking at the June berries where we're different than the grocery stores. We start picking at 6 a.m. So stand opens at 9. We try and get ahead. But all day long, those vans that you see coming in every half hour, straight from the field. Nothing hits the cooler, and you start looking at, I'm not going to mention any chains or anybody, but, that goes from the farmer to the wholesaler. There's a rotation. And then from the wholesaler to the store, and then the store's got to rotate through the store, where we're just going field shelf all day long. So it's pretty hard to compete with that. And so the business has gotten bigger very quickly. The only thing I could say would be to grow more, but you grow more, you get growing pains, and you got to be careful.
Who picks all those strawberries? I know that's a horrible job.
I don't think it is a...
You still get kids out of school to do it?
No. They'll come by, and usually by 10 o'clock coffee time, they're
back in store.
Yeah, mostly Mexicans are all over that. And, people ask me a lot about what they're like. They've gone home for the winter, and we messenger all the time. They're like family. Great relationship with them. They'll do anything for them. There's times when there's some real trying times when things go wrong. And these men, they just say, Rob, we got your back, right? Because sometimes you're just stressed out. You're like, what are we going to do? They're like, boss, we got this. We won't go home. We'll fix this. And, when you've got guys like that behind you, it's a pretty good feeling. But when you watch them pick strawberries, they always got their music boxes on, and they're singing in the field. It's like these men singing, and they're happy, and they're content.
I have one question.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that you use plastic mulch.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot being spoken about recently about microplastic particles that get into the environment.
Mm-hmm.
What sort of mulch do you use, and is that a concern for you?
Yeah, so we do it is a plastic, and we do send it to recycling, and we're very careful not to get any plastic into the field. We don't want to see plastic come through. Anyways, after we remove all the plastic, we'll uplift it all, and then we'll send the guys out with buckets and look for any little piece anywhere. But, as I said, times keep changing very quickly. They now have plastics that are dissolving within a year. Like, here it comes. Here's this whole new generation that it's breaking down that fast. But I went to an ag show last year and got some of this stuff. It was breaking down, like they said, within a year. But how do I use it on my 2-year crop? So then the second year, all my weeds would be coming through because it's breaking down too fast. But, I mean, technology's coming, where you won't see the need to recycle. It'll go down itself. I think technology is never going to stop. And as a young farmer, you have to stay on top of technology and learn.
Do you grow in greenhouses at all?
Yeah, so I have what they're called is tunnels. And I got 70,000 square feet, put those up in, I think 2011, 2012 we went up. And so they're a frame, and then all their legs are drilled into the ground. I just bought a drilling machine, and we drilled all these things in, and you can just pull the plastic over it, right? And so you build a hot house, and then in the summertime when it gets too hot, you pull the plastic back off. When we put them in, I was excited to get into them, and then realized pulling this giant plastic pieces that are 500 feet long by 40 feet wide, that's a big chunk of plastic, and it's very heavy, and it's a lot of work every time we went to move them. And then, but anyways, we're still going on them. I just put raspberries into 3 tunnels this year, and hoping if I put the raspberries under this special plastic, it'll stop the spotting on the raspberries. Raspberries, you ever see the sun scald? It's that white spot on it, right? It's just like a sunburn. So the plastic that's on those tunnels, it's called luminance. It'll take out all the harmful red light, and it'll just bring in the good light. And it'll keep the heat up, and it'll heat up more quicker in the morning and hold the heat in later at night. And hoping maybe it could get me 2 weeks earlier on some of the raspberries. And so once again, hopefully this works. I'm just trying 3 tunnels of them for this year. Might be able to start getting raspberries 2 weeks earlier in the season. Extend our season out longer. Always looking for new ideas.
What about, I see farms that spread huge amounts of remay over crops to get them growing quickly at the very beginning. Do you reuse that stuff?
Yes, it's very expensive.
Yeah.
Try and get through as many years as we can. We've gotten 3rd year before. It's hard to get 3rd year. Windstorms will just shred it.
Yeah.
And once again, it breaks down pretty quick.
How wide a roll do you have to buy?
There's many options.
Huge, huh?
I go with a 60 feet wide. Yeah. And I think they come 1,400 feet long. I'm using it for corn and bunch carrots.
And do you get corn actual that you can sell out of your corn maze, or is it a variety that you don't care about getting corn?
You can use 2 varieties. The corn out of there right now is basically being fed to my cows. And
Oh, that's good.
yeah, I'm raising some beef. And, yeah.
No end of-
Well, yeah. The corn is like my newest thing that I really got into last winter. So as you're starting to understand, I get a little bit bored sometimes if I do things for too many years. Then I want to try some new stuff. So got big this year into corn, and it was fairly successful, going it different ways. And so starting out with a heavy phosphorus and a little bit of potash to start the corn off, because all it really needs is to get the roots and get started. And then when the plant gets up to about 5-6 inch, then hitting it with more nitrogen. And then if you can get that big root system down, and while it's in the cooler weather, because it's not going to grow that fast anyway, and add the remay, hit it with nitrogen this year, and pow, up it went like really quick. And I got I wasn't that early compared to some other farmers around here, but a lot earlier. So it was successful, and I got some new ideas to build on for next year. But I really see corn being a big one for me as a rotation crop with my berries and other things.
How do you control deer and birds?
Live in jail. all day long, pull up my truck, open the gate, pull my truck inside, close the gate behind me, go to the next field, open the gates, pull my truck ahead, close the gates. And the birds. The geese are a tough one. The only thing that really works for the geese is running baling twine. So I'll do it in a lot of places, but it's more expense, but cheaper than losing your crop. So baling twine's fairly inexpensive, and every 20 feet, right across the field, just strand, one after another. The geese won't go under it. Geese aren't like a bird that flies around or just jumps up and takes off. They take off like a plane. They will not go under those tunnels. They will not go under that wire. They look up and see anything above them, they won't go under it. And it works, but when you're in the middle of a field, now what have you got to tie to? So now we got to start putting posts down the field and putting this stuff both ways. And I don't really have much problem with straw, just with the blueberries. When the blueberries are on there, the little thieves. Yeah.
Do you have any idea what's going to become of Panama Flats? Will vegetables ever be grown there again? Do you know?
Well, I don't really want to comment other than to say that somebody really ruined the Panama Flats.
Yeah.
It's disastrous,
I know.
and it's a big shame. Yeah. But yeah, they've asked us, and nope.
No more.
Yeah.
Oh, remember Heather walking there and the smell of all that corn just ripening? I don't know what that smell is like, but it was so great.
Yeah. I like the onion harvesting at Panama Flats. Brings my childhood back,
Yeah?
day after day. Yeah.
Yeah. Heck, were you that kid riding around on a bicycle checking things? No. Checking the irrigation, and did you people put in all that irrigation, the pump that took the water out of the ditch, and now it's sitting there, I guess?
No, when we left, everything came.
Oh, it did, okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Ralph, back to your strawberries and raspberries, anybody in the agriculture business or anybody, a family who's grown raspberries and strawberries and stuff, knows how labor intensive they are. And also, congratulations to your family, because we had a field of strawberries and we know how long it takes to get from the kids or the Mexicans picking them to the store in your case.
Mm-hmm.
The spoilage on them must be something too, because we know they can spoil so quickly
Mhm.
if they do moisture or anything like that. So kudos to you, because it's a labor-intensive program.
Mm-hmm.
And for you to provide all that for the community in your area is really wonderful.
Yeah, a lot of it is the SAWAP group in Vancouver that brings the people in. All of BC would be devastated without that program. I mean, all the farms. Last number I heard, there's 6,000, I think, that are coming in, not for a long period of time, but for those few months that the crops are on heavy.
Well, thank you so much.
All right.
We really appreciate all the information that you shared with us, and thank you for coming and spending your afternoon with us. You're welcome to stay. We're going to break for refreshments now, so if you'd love to have a cup of coffee with us and
Sure.
some cookies or whatever, we'd be pleased to have you.